Hello and welcome back to Mint Techcetra, your go-to podcast for everything tech and business. I'm your host, Nelson John. Here's the thing. Few technologies spark as much curiosity, hype, and long-term consequence as quantum computing. For years, it lived quietly inside research labs. Now it's moving into policy rooms, boardrooms, and national strategy documents. Today in India, the shift became very real with the release of the National Quantum Roadmap by Niti Aayog. It's a document that doesn't just talk about science, it talks about ambition, talent, industry adoption, and where India wants to stand in the global tech hierarchy over the next decade. To help us break this down, I'm joined by Dr. Amith Singhee, Director of IBM Research India and CTO for IBM India and South Asia. Amith leads IBM's technology strategy across hybrid cloud, AI, quantum computing, security, and sustainability. He also works closely with academia, startups, and industry to turn research into real world impact. Importantly, IBM was the knowledge partner for this report, which means Amit and his team were deeply involved in shaping the national quantum roadmap itself. Amit, it's a great pleasure to have you with us here on Mint Techcetra.
Hi, Nelson. It's my pleasure too.
Absolutely. All right, Amit, let's jump right in. For years, quantum in India was largely a research conversation. Today, this roadmap, it feels like a shift. It signals intent, urgency, and scale. So, from where you sit, what are the first few things India absolutely has to get right if this roadmap has to move from, say, intent to real world impact?
That's a great question, Nelson. And yes, the intention with this roadmap that Niti Aayog Frontier Tech Hub had was to convert it into action
Hmm.
at the highest levels of the government and across ministries and in the ecosystem. And in the roadmap, the report outlines a vision for 2035. It envisions certain endpoints for India for 2035, which would make sense if you really want to be one of the top few players in the world in this space.
Hmm.
And some of those endpoints include, things like having incubated at least 10 globally competitive startups,
Hmm.
each surpassing $100 million in revenue cumulatively, capturing at least 50% of the global quantum software and services market, having a commanding position in key aspects of the quantum supply chain for hardware and software, and so on. There are like five key endpoints.
Right.
Now, to achieve that, the roadmap also calls out certain key priorities and recommendations that we have to act on now
Hmm.
to achieve those. And I won't go through all seven, but just highlight a few. One is around the workforce.
Right.
There's tremendous hunger in the country to learn about quantum. India is the second largest user of some of the quantum systems that are available on the cloud from IBM, which shows the amount of hunger and how people are engaging. But then, if you look at how long they continue to use it in terms of usage hours, that's very, very low,
True.
which shows that there's potential to grow the workforce, technical workforce around engineering, scientific research workforce, and also business savvy workforce that understands how this technology connects to business and impact. So we make a recommendation of increasing it by an order of magnitude within the next 2 to 3 years,
Hmm.
because only then, within another 7 years, are you going to see the kind of endpoints. Another very important area is to catalyze industry engagement and investment.
Right.
While the government is investing, the investment from private sector is minuscule.
Hmm.
Um, India has a lot of startups coming up in this space. We are actually number five in terms of number of
All
startups,
right.
but then the private investment is very low. Part of that is because Indian industry doesn't necessarily understand quantum, what it
Right.
means for their business
True.
over the coming times. So that connection has to be made very clear to them, and they have to jump in and invest. A third area which is very important is in India's capacity for doing fundamental science breakthroughs and translating from lab to market. So this ties many things. It includes funding, but it also includes a risk appetite in all of our institutions, in research institutions, academic institutions, and our funding agencies. an urgency, and something that rewards people who take risk, step out of the box, and try and do big things. So all of these have to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years for us to reach some of those endpoints.
Right. So, Amit, you mentioned, that, industries, they don't understand the benefit or, the concept of quantum right in India here. So could you quickly run us through, possibly like what are the benefits, how do industries, they benefit out of this push?
Yeah, see, quantum computing, I'll take that as an example, although
Hmm.
quantum is also about sensing and communications. Uh, I'll take computing as an example. It's a new kind of computing. It's not your digital ones and zeros and bits. It's just a
Absolutely.
very different way of processing information.
Qubits and all. Yeah.
And qubits, you got it.
Yeah.
And with these qubits, you can actually model information in probabilistic sense. You can use superposition and entanglement.
Hmm.
What it lets you do is, once we have machines that are powerful enough and once the algorithms are discovered, there are three big areas which will get disrupted.
Hmm.
One is wherever you're trying to simulate nature at an atomic or molecular
Right.
level. So this can be materials discovery, chemicals discovery, for things like agriculture and nitrogen fixation
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
fertilizers, biotech, drug discovery. So there are many, many applications where we have challenges. We are stuck a little bit because we're not able to simulate nature at the full accuracy level.
Hmm.
Second area is around machine learning and detecting patterns from less data, complex patterns from less data.
Hmm.
Today's AI systems are amazing, but where you don't have enough data and you have complex structure inside, detecting those is another area where we see potential. And the third is optimization.
Hmm.
You have large logistics problems, routing of ships or trains or ports, large planning problems with many, many variables and a big search space where you're trying to find that optimal design point. So these three areas, all of them are very relevant to business.
Hmm.
uh, and many, many industry sectors. So if they understand how this relates to what they're trying to develop,
Right.
that's where I think the magic will happen.
Right. So you primarily see, the scientific community benefiting the most out of it.
I would say the scientific community is the one who will translate it into action,
Action. All right. Uh-huh.
but the beneficiaries will be business and society.
Right. Right.
Because if you can do a better job of managing your ports,
Hmm.
it's not
Hmm.
just the scientific community that
Absolutely. Yeah.
benefit, right?
That makes
Or if
sense.
you can discover new materials that help you build better planes, it's not just the scientific
Scientific
community, right?
community. That's
Yeah.
true. That makes sense. So, also, when you're looking at, how other countries, they've approached, early quantum push, what are the common pitfalls, India should be careful not to repeat, like?
There are countries who are doing a good job. I think we should look at those. There
Hmm.
are countries who are moving slower. I think moving slow and not recognizing the potential quickly is the biggest
Biggest
pitfall.
pitfall. Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are some countries, from an IBM lens, we have seen great momentum in Japan, for instance, where
Mm-hmm.
they took a leadership position, brought in a quantum computer, and created a very nice ecosystem with the universities there, with big industry and researchers all coming together to define problems that they're working on. They plug their quantum computers together with their supercomputers to look at
Mm-hmm.
hybrid workflows. um, these are things we can do. We have that kind of skill and potential. Companies that have been slow to adopt or who have not looked at it at a national level, who sort of left it to a state here or a company there, they've found it challenging to really drive things at scale. So I think that's what we have to do. The good thing is India has recognized that, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the
Mm-hmm.
National Quantum Mission, with this stuff from Niti Aayog,
Right.
with many states, it's really a top-down thing. So there's a commitment and an intent, like you had mentioned, which is good. But I think it's in execution now where we have to put all the pieces together.
Together. And see that. Yeah. So, so you told, it's from the top down. Like, so when we look at, India's place in the global quantum map, the global quantum map, it's, quantum isn't being built in isolation, I would say. It's a very global thing, with companies, countries, and research institutions all moving in parallel, like how you mentioned. Like, so, you operate at the intersection of national strategy and global enterprises of technology. So, how does IBM's global quantum roadmap intersect with what India is trying to build? And where do you see India fitting into the global quantum value chain?
Yeah. Uh, That's a great question. I spend a lot of mental time on that. So IBM has been publishing and updating every year its development roadmap for quantum computing, which projects out like 4 5 years. Where do we want our hardware to be? Where do we want our software
Hmm.
to be in terms of capability and things like that? And the team's done a great job staying on track. The big milestones, there are two big milestones coming as per our roadmap. One is demonstrating quantum advantage
Hmm.
by next year, later next year, which means that there would, finding one application area where somebody came up with a quantum algorithm,
Hmm.
which is very difficult to match using a classical algorithm.
Right.
Now, this will be a iterative process. Someone will come up with something on quantum, then some classical guy will say, "I did something better," right? So it's going to be a
True.
scientific process, but we expect that will be an important inflection point, because once that is shown, then there will be a confidence that okay, it really can do better, at least in one area, and it will really spark a lot of innovation around algorithm discovery, because it will make the potential even more real globally, right? In friendly countries, in non-friendly countries, and hopefully in India. The second big milestone that we have is 2029, where we want to have a 200 qubit, what we call as a fault tolerant quantum computer.
Hmm.
Today's quantum computers, they use all the quantum principles, but they are susceptible to noise, at a quantum level.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
after some time, the signals degrade, and then you have to redo it. That means it limits how complex computations you can run at a time. But once you have error correction sufficiently so that it's not so susceptible, that's what we call fault tolerant. That will unlock the door to true quantum computing algorithms like Shor's algorithm, which is very famous because it can help you break cryptography. That will still need much bigger fault tolerant machines, but it will open that era of true
Right.
quantum algorithms. I think India is positioned very well because we have time. And if we take all the actions that the report calls out, then there will be capacity in the country and a deep understanding and skill of quantum algorithms, IP, and understanding and investment from industry, so that India can actually leverage these disruptions that are happening globally to its advantage. And if we miss it, then of course someone else is going to have that first mover advantage, not us.
True. So you're saying, like, you see India playing a stronger role in building the core technology itself, and not just building on applications or solutions on the platform, right?
Well, for these disruptions that I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
I think India is a little late in the hardware tech. Okay,
Right.
we will get there, but it's not so easy to catch up and do it so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to advance our hardware tech, which the NQM is funding, but we have to also advance our algorithms and quantum information science and application technology.
Mm-hmm.
So because we are not at a stage where you can simply build software on quantum, people don't even, like in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, you didn't know how to do machine learning. You didn't know how to do optimization on normal computers. There was a phase of decades of deep research to even discover those applications, how to do it on digital machines.
Mm-hmm.
That has to happen now on quantum.
Right.
And so that's a research area that India can lead in if we move fast, um, while we build up our hardware capacity also.
Right, right. So, also, so one of the important signals in this roadmap is to push this out from lab and into pilot projects. So over the next few years, where do you see quantum delivering value for Indian enterprises? You've already explained this in the start, but then probably you could get into it a bit in detail.
Yeah, definitely. So one area is quantum sensing, which is widely, people are hoping it is maybe more ahead in terms of ready for applications compared to other areas.
Right.
So quantum sensing is where you have these sensors that can sense because of quantum phenomena, and so they are very very sensitive, whether it's sensing gravity, whether it's sensing location, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be the first set of technologies that get deployed perhaps in the strategic sector, for use by for defense or other space purposes, and maybe even in private sector.
Right.
The other area is going to be quantum computing potentially, especially some of these noise resistant algorithms. For example, recently some early signs of application came from work HSBC did with IBM
Mm-hmm.
in the banking domain to model things in bond trading,
Right.
right? Where they show some benefits. And so a lot more work is needed there, but there
Mm-hmm.
could be some areas either in scientific discovery processes or in chemistry, drug design, finance, where we might see some early applications within the next few years.
Right. So, I mean, you mentioned about drug discovery. So, I mean, do you have any, could you walk us through any examples, where IBM has worked on, like, probably that has led to a discovery of something major or anything but related to drugs?
So in quantum, right now, where things stand is we're not at a place where you can actually discover drugs yet
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
machines and the algorithms have to still scale up.
Scale up. Right.
What people are trying to do is they're taking certain core problems that show up in biotech.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm just broadening it to beyond drug discovery, biotechnology,
Right.
and saying that that simulation of that chemistry, if I did it on a supercomputer versus if I did it in a different way on a quantum computer,
Mm-hmm.
can I get more accurate? Can I get faster? And one example is there's this class of algorithms being researched recently. Riken in Japan
Mm-hmm.
applied an advancement on that using the IBM quantum computer with their supercomputer
Oh.
Fugaku
Mm-hmm.
for a hybrid algorithm on something called iron sulfur clusters. Now, iron sulfur clusters show up in a lot of biological processes,
Mm-hmm.
including photosynthesis.
All right.
And if you can simulate the chemistry of that very well, that can unlock applications in different domains to try and push the chemistry to, do different kinds of translations out of it.
Right.
So that's one example. People are trying to apply it to protein and ligand
Mm-hmm.
interactions to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
simulate how the molecules would interact, to model different kind of protein structures, especially when there's mutation, so that you can model under disease settings how does that protein behave. So when you're trying to then apply certain drug molecules to it, you can understand whether they will interact properly or not interact properly. So these are some application areas. I have to call out that this is not ready for prime time yet. People are understanding how to run these simulations. It will be a few years before we see the applications pop up.
Sounds interesting. I mean, also, access, has been, a recurring theme for, India's quantum journey. Like, so access to probably systems, tools, the ability to experiment without massive upfront investments. So, how is IBM working with its partners here in India to expand access to quantum systems and experimentation across academia, startups, and industry?
Yeah, it's a very important point. And so IBM has actually made its quantum computers available for free to anybody for
Oh.
almost a decade now on the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Indians have actually been learning quantum for free using that free access. Of course, that free access is limited.
Right.
You will not be able to use it to publish a paper in Science or Nature,
Mm-hmm.
but you
Mm-hmm.
can learn quantum computing. You can write quantum programs. You can become skilled enough to get certified.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certification program. All the software tutorials and all of these are in open source.
Mm-hmm.
IBM has also open sourced the programming libraries, which are called Qiskit.
Yes.
So the software is free, the hardware is free if you're a learner. If you want to do advanced research, let's say you want dedicated access for 1 year, you want to use a lot of it to run complex simulations,
Mm-hmm.
then you need paid access.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and we have many programs. We have an startup network. We have an educators program where you can apply and get additional credits, or more access. Apart from that, more recently, we have also partnered with Tata Consulting Services in
Mm-hmm.
India. Next year, we are hoping to be bringing a quantum system to India in Amravati, Andhra Pradesh,
Mm-hmm.
working closely with the government there, where also TCS is investing to gain access and develop capacity and engage the ecosystem around that. IBM is investing to bring the machine, and Andhra Pradesh is facilitating, the location and bringing in other partners such as L&T and others to help with the construction of the space and so on. So there's a lot of ecosystem partnership happening where everybody's pitching in what they do best to take the level of access and availability to, a step change than what it is today.
Right. So you mentioned it was free for all. So I mean, do you see a lot of interest and a lot of people logging into the system?
Yeah, we've seen, I think this is a year old number, more than 77,000 Indians
Oh wow. Okay.
who've done it already. um that's probably gone up now. I haven't checked the latest numbers.
So then it's an active number, right?
It's
People
an
using,
active number,
uh,
yeah.
and it's growing.
It's growing. There we have this, there's this program called Qiskit Advocates. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, the Qiskit is the software library
All
with
right.
which you can write programs. If you train yourself enough, you can become a Qiskit advocate, and you can run
Mm-hmm.
training programs for others and so on. And there's people in India who are nowhere attached to IBM or anything, who are themselves learning and becoming Qiskit advocates. And in those tier two, tier three cities, they are running, boot camps and hackathons and engaging. So it's amazing the level of hunger that's there to
Wow.
learn.
That's really interesting, but I mean, understanding, India is a diverse market. I mean, so how critical do you say is cloud-based access, in marketing, sorry, in making quantum more inclusive?
Cloud-based access is critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if we put the computer in India, the access to it will be through a cloud style interface.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot expect everybody to go to Amravati, only then
Right,
you
right.
can log onto the machine. So the way you access these machines has to be through a cloud-based interface. That is why from day one we have put our computers on the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a very nice and easy to use interface through which you can go log in to your account and see the computers that are active. You can start using them and start programming. The
Right.
programming you do on your laptop using Python and these libraries, it connects over the network, through the cloud to the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
backend quantum computer, runs the processing there, and you get the results back in your laptop. So it's really, we have this principle of hybrid cloud in
Mm-hmm.
IBM that a lot of our clients rely on, where traditionally hybrid has been about I use private and public, I
Public.
use multiple data
Yeah.
centers. But really it's evolving into a hybrid where you have classical, quantum, public, private, AI machines, all of that behind a unified way of accessing that compute.
Right. I mean, so, talking about, skills, I mean, quantum would require a very different mix of skill sets. So how would you assess, India's current situation? Or what kind of, talent and capacity do we have?
Yeah, I think it's at a nascent stage.
Mhm.
There are some researchers and some practitioners who are really good, who are world class, but
Mhm.
it's not enough for a country the size of India and the ambitions we have. Very nascent. That's why the report from Niti calls out the first recommendation is actually around workforce. Um, the good thing is there is some action. You might know AICT earlier set up these course syllabus for a master's program in quantum and also a BTech
Mhm.
minor in quantum. So that will hopefully help. But then we don't have that many teachers in the country to teach all of that to the thousands and thousands of students. So definitely a lot of work is needed, both to create teachers, to create students, but then to create those more advanced skills who can work in the research labs
Mhm.
at a global competency level, whether it's hardware engineering, whether it's software engineering, whether it's computer information, quantum information science, whether it's the physics of it, whether it's the theory of it. That is where we need action. We need to retain talent. A lot of there is definitely in these advanced areas a brain drain that happens, where students tend to go abroad for PhD or postdoc. So we need to have more intervention around retaining talent of that sort in the country, so that it's compelling for them, and we build that capacity, seed that capacity around that talent.
Right. So looking ahead, so what skills do you think will matter the most, when it comes to quantum computing and its deployment to real world scenarios?
There are many skills. So if I focus just on quantum computing and from a deployment lens, definitely skills around mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
skills, core science skills, even if it's not very advanced science, are important. Skills in computer science, quantum information science, and ability to think about application and impact will be also important, so that you can translate that into real world.
So I mean, India is good in mathematics. So do you see like, a good up push on this aspect?
India is good in mathematics, and that is one of the levers we have to use.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, what happens, I think, is after high school,
Mm-hmm.
although strong mathematics, people go off and do other things.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure that we have advanced mathematics uh, people who are going into PhDs in quantum information science and doing that in India,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and not somewhere else.
Right, right. That's true. Very true. So also, do you believe that, is there anything else or anything that can be done beyond, what is being done currently for the workforce so they get ready for quantum technologies? And is IBM actually contributing anything to that effort here in India?
A lot can be done. IBM, like I mentioned, we've made our computers free for access. We
Mm-hmm.
made the
Mm-hmm.
software layer free. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of learning material, tutorials, and examples
Right.
that are available for free also from IBM. These are available across the world, also in India. We have also run courses. Some
Mm-hmm.
of folks in my team, they have run courses together with Indian faculty, like from IIT Madras. There's actually a very popular NPTEL course,
Mm-hmm.
which has had tens of thousands of students over the last 3 years who've registered and gone through it.
All right.
Many of my colleagues have been involved in the work, just as individuals, in the work to actually write the books and the course material for these AICTE courses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so on many fronts, IBM and IBMers are involved in helping with education.
Right. So do you believe, I mean, should we start looking for the right talent right from college itself? So is there some kind of university program, that, is in play here?
Yes. So in college, like I mentioned, the AICT course materials. So
Mm-hmm.
at least now there's a well-defined set of courses one would want to, one university, say if you're a university and said, I want to have a master's in quantum.
Right.
Now you know what you have to teach. What you have to do is have teachers who can teach that,
Right.
at the
Mm-hmm.
right skill level, have projects, all the things you need to do to create a new program. So that is what has to be done. Alongside that, strong research projects have to exist in the country across universities, because unless you develop those research skills to think ahead and create innovations, where quantum is today, it's not a pure applied area. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like software engineering, right? That you learn
Right.
software engineering and there's a job waiting for you.
True.
It is still a research field, it's an innovation field. So apart from learning the basics and the theory and all of that, you have to learn how to innovate also.
Mm-hmm.
And that will happen when you do research projects as part of, let's say, masters by research, or as part of your PhD, or do kind of extended internships in industry, uh, so that then those skills, theoretical skills with the innovation skills, is what will allow you to be effective.
Right. Amit, thank you so much for, these incredible insights that you've shared with us today. I mean, and also thank you for joining us, and helping us demystify what quantum really means for India's technology future.
It's my pleasure, Nelson. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. As that's a wrap, today's conversation makes one thing clear. India's quantum ambitions are no longer abstract. They're a roadmap, there's momentum, and there is a growing ecosystem coming together to make this real. The opportunity now lies in sustained execution, deeper industry participation, and long term thinking. For more conversations at the intersection of technology and business, subscribe to Mint Techcetra on HD Smartcast or on YouTube and on all leading platforms. I'm your host, Nelson John, signing off. Have a great day.